This conference, of course, to discuss security. And normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team.
JD Vance absolutely ripping the entire European leadership across the world, and it is glorious to see. He has an absolute way about him, right? Very to the point, very cutthroat, which I really like, tells it how it is. It's amazing to see. And one thing that we are seeing is other people in the Republican Party taking that role as well, right? We want it to be as cutthroat and as in your face as possible, because the other side, in my opinion, is pull all stops. We're going straight for the jugular every single time, and they do not let a crisis go to waste. So we have to stand on our principles and our values and show through strength exactly who we are and what we do. So Marco Rubio is another great example of this. He goes on with Margaret Brennan and goes over exactly what happened during the JD Vance speech and exactly what he thinks about it as well. And shocker, Margaret doesn't agree. This is hilarious. So with that being said, let's get into it.
I want to ask you about what happened in Munich, Germany at the security conference. Vice President Vance gave a speech and he told U.S. allies that the threat he worries about the most is not Russia. It is not China. He called it the threat from within, and he lectured about what he described as censorship, mainly focusing, though, on including more views from the right. He also met with the leader of a far-right party known as the AfD, which, as you know, is under investigation and monitoring by German intelligence because of extremism. What did all of this accomplish other than irritating our allies?
Well, why would our allies or anybody be irritated by free speech and by someone giving their opinion? We are, after all, democracies. The Munich Security Conference is largely a conference of democracies in which one of the things that we cherish and value is the ability to speak freely and provide your opinions. And so I think if anyone's angry about his word, they don't have to agree with him, but to be angry about it, I think actually makes his point. I thought it was actually a pretty historic speech, whether you agree with him or not. I think the valid points he's making to Europe is we are concerned that the true values that we share, the values that bind us together with Europe, are things like free speech and democracy and our shared history in winning 2 world wars and defeating Soviet communism and the like. These are the values that we shared in common. And in that Cold War, we fought against things like censorship and oppression and so forth. And when you see backsliding and you raise that, that's a very valid concern. We can't tell them how to run their countries. He simply expressed in a speech his view of it, which a lot of people frankly share. And I thought he said a lot of things in that speech that needed to be said. And honestly, I don't know why anybody would be upset about it. People are allowed, you don't have to agree with someone's speech. I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, but you don't have to agree with someone's speech to at least appreciate the fact they have a right to say it, and that you should listen to it and see whether those criticisms are valid. I assure you, the United States has come under withering criticism on many occasions from many leaders in Europe, and we don't go around throwing temper tantrums about it.
Well, he was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the
Well, I have to
censorship
disagree with
was
you.
specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history. I also think it's wrong. Again, I go back to the point of his speech. Okay, the point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion in free speech and intolerance for opposing points of view within Europe. And that's of concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together in this transatlantic union that everybody talks about. And I think allies and friends and partners that have worked together now for 80 years should be able to speak frankly to one another in open forums. Without being offended, insulted, or upset. And I spoke to foreign ministers from multiple countries throughout Europe. Many of them probably didn't like the speech or didn't agree with it, but they were continuing to engage with us on all sorts of issues that unite us. So again, at the end of the day, I think that people give that is a forum in which you're supposed to be inviting people to give speeches, not basically a chorus where everyone is saying the exact same thing. That's not always going to be the case when it's a collection of democracies where leaders have the right and the privilege to speak their minds in forums such as these.
Mr. Secretary, I'm told that we are out of time. A lot to get through with you. We appreciate you making time today.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm JT, and I made Result Hunter, the search.
Marco Rubio, pretty solid performance. You know how the liberal media hosts do it, right? They lull you, right? And then right at the end, they try to get you a little gotcha. And I'm happy that you stayed strong through that. I think it's pretty awesome that you're taking JD's back. And especially since, like you said yourself, you agree with most of what he says. And I think a broad swath of this country as well thinks the same way. So I'm happy that, we got people that are trying to stay solid within the conservative party. And part of that is going on to these, legacy media outlets and really giving them the business. And I'm happy that we are seeing the tide shift and people are fighting back. Pretty awesome, in my opinion, interview. And he carried himself really, really well. And I mean, Marco Rubio has a massive job to do. And part of that is to create peace, hopefully, in the Middle East and in Europe. And one thing that is to talk all these leaders. So create the olive branch, create conversation, create an outlet to actually have conversations with each other. So looking forward to seeing how it goes. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and share Smooth Unfiltered. Peace.